Hello, hello. Thank you for coming and checking out my channel. If this is your first time here, then I hope that you enjoy what you're about to see, enough to give me a like, a subscribe. I would appreciate that very much. And if you've been here before, I really appreciate you coming back. My name is Jennifer, and this is Jen the Bookworm. So today I'm bringing you kind of a smaller video. A couple weeks ago or a week ago, I did a couple of small videos, 6 or so minutes, and I really enjoyed that format. And I know that it's easier for some people to click on a video that is shorter amount of time than longer. So I'm trying to put out just a small amount of content per video in some of them where it's appropriate. And so today I just wanted to talk a little bit about how BookTube has changed the way I read. It would be difficult to deny otherwise. Whenever you become a booktuber, whenever you are concerned with content, it does somewhat change the way that you read. Prior to BookTube, I used to do a lot more binge reading. I used to, find a series that I liked and just read it until the end of the series or until the end of my interest, one of the two. And now I don't do that quite as much. Now I'm, if I want to read Mistborn, then I usually plan to read, the first book on this month, on, say January, then the second one in February, and the third one in March. Or like this year, I'm reading A Song of Ice and Fire, and I started in January with A Game of Thrones, and then in February the next one, and so on and so forth. Which takes a lot longer overall to read the book, but it does seem to avoid some burnout issue. Before BookTube, I started reading the Dresden Files. I've been turned on to the Dresden Files for a while, and I was listening to the audiobooks, and I listened to like 4 of them in a row, and then got burnt out. And it took me another whole year to get back to any of them. So spreading them out over a period of time allows you to somewhat avoid the burnout of a series, but also it allows you to fit other kinds of books in so that you have a varied amount of content to give to your followers. So that is one way in which it's changed the way I read. I used to finish a book with no clear idea of where I was going next. So sometimes if I finished a book and I didn't know where to go next, I would go days without reading, and sometimes weeks without reading. I would go a long period of time in between books because I didn't have a clear idea of where I was going next. Having a TBR and saying this is what my plans are for this month for reading, for some people feels confining, but for me it allows me to already know what's coming up next, so I don't have to go through and be like, okay, what do I want now? Because I'm sort of one of those people who, you ask me what I want for dinner, and be like, I don't know. But if I come up with a menu in the beginning of the week, then I always know what's coming up, and I don't have as much much trouble when 5 o'clock comes around figuring out what to make for dinner. So the TBR works for me in that way. I would say a much bigger percentage of my conversation with the average person in my life is about books. I always have been a reader, but I haven't always been so avid a reader, and I spend a lot of time now that I'm a booktuber on reading and watching booktube YouTube videos and just consuming information about books, consuming books themselves. And so a lot more of my conversation when I meet up with someone I haven't seen in a while, or when I'm talking to someone, is what I'm reading right now. And so I find that a lot of people, or maybe some people in my life might roll their eyes a little bit when I start talking about books, because I'm doing it far more often than I used to. One thing, I read more books than I did before. I mean, before BookTube, well before BookTube, I would read maybe 1 or 2 months a book, or 1 or 2 books a month. I would read 1 or 2 books a month. Um, Unhurried, just kind of moving through whenever I feel like picking it up. Then when I started BookTube, I was solidly at 3 books a month for a few months. And that was okay. Some of those books were pretty big books because I was reading the Stormlight Archive to begin with, but it's still averaging about 3 books in a month's time. But now I would say I pretty comfortably average about 5 books in a month's time. And there's some months when I go above. And I'm sure that when I start reading the Stormlight Archives over again, then there'll be some months that I go below. But on average, I read about 5 books a month, which is vastly different from before BookTube when it was maybe 1 or 2. For me, reading is far more social now than it was before. As much as I do have people in my life that read. They just don't always read the same things that I read, and they don't read with the same intensity that I read. And they're reading more leisurely than I am. And I don't have a problem with reading with the intensity that I'm reading, but some people just, can't relate. So, and that's fine. But I do now have a community of people, a couple of Discords that I frequent, people in the BookTube community who read with the same intensity that I read, who read the same things that I read. And so it's become a lot more social now than it was before. Before, reading was always a very solitary thing. And I've been doing lots of buddy reads a few buddy reads and a couple of readathons, and just even if I'm not reading something with anybody else or for any kind of competition, just reading and going on to Discord and saying, I'm really enjoying this book because, has been great. It's been nice to get the feedback from other people, to see what they think about my thoughts, to see what I think about their thoughts. So that's been a lot of fun. I said before, one of the big changes was always having a clear idea of what I want to read next. So I've sort of touched on this before, but TBRs are one of those things that I never had before. And it was funny because I was just talking to my partner the other day, and I said something about my TBR, and he says, I don't have one of those. And yeah, it's something different. It's something that, I now plan out for the month what I'm going to read in that month. And I've never done that before BookTube. But like I said, I do find that it helps me. For some people, and maybe it will be like this for me in the future, but for some people, they seem to feel pressure when they put something on their TBR. And honestly, I don't view it that way. I have, in the past, broken my TBR if I came across another book that I really wanted to read, or something needed to be changed around, or, I could buddy read with somebody if I do it this month, but not, next month or whatever. So I have found that having a TBR, it's not stressful for me. It doesn't apply pressure, but it gives me direction. And it's direction that I really feel like is useful for me. It makes reading a little more efficient. It makes me faster. It makes me, I don't know if better, but I can fit more books in a month when I know precisely what I'm reading next. So my question to you is, what has changed about reading for you since you've been on BookTube? So some of these maybe sound familiar, or maybe you feel differently about things. Like I've seen a lot of people starting to go from a TBR to an MBR, a might be read list, rather than a to be read list. I've seen people change how they're approaching BookTube, but in general, what kinds of things changed for you when you became a booktuber, or changed for you when you started to watch BookTube? Maybe you're not a booktuber, maybe you don't put out videos, but maybe you are a little bit, you've upped your game, or you've changed the way you've done things because you're participating in Discords with a bunch of booktubers, or you're really interested in books, and so you've been in those circles, but even though you're not putting out a video yourself, it still might be changing the way that you're reading. I'm interested in continuing this conversation. So if you have some insights into how BookTube has changed the way that you read, please put some comments in the comment section below. I'd be interested in hearing. And if you liked what you saw here, please consider giving me a like and a subscription. I am getting close to the 100 benchmark, and I'd like to see myself get up there before the end of summer if we can do it. And so if you would be willing to help me out, I would appreciate that very much. And I hope that you have enjoyed this and that you have a great rest of your day.